You came back. We knew you would. Welcome to Fear Consortium, Season 3. What began as a whisper has grown into something we can no longer control, and neither can you. This season, we go deeper than we've ever dared, past the shadows you've learned to live with, into the ones you've tried to forget. Before we descend, subscribe, turn on every notification, because this season, missing an episode isn't just a choice, it could be a mistake. So settle in, turn down the lights, and remember, whatever follows you out of this place tonight, you invited it in. This is Fear Consortium. Season 3 has begun. You already know not to stop. You know the story. You've known it your whole life. But she's standing there in the cold, in that dress, and something in you, something that was taught to help, that was raised to stop for someone who needs a ride, is already slowing down. Every ghost story needs a road. Not a house, not a forest. Not a body of water or an abandoned building or any other fixed, stationary stages that haunting prefers. A road, specifically because a road implies motion, implies the ordinary, forward momentum of a life going somewhere, implies the ordinary human act of getting from one place to another, on a specific night, for a specific reason, with the windows up against the cold and the radio on, and no expectation whatsoever that tonight is going to be the night the world stops making sense. The legend we're exploring tonight has no single origin point. It has no one author, no founding document, no year it was invented or place it was first told. It was already everywhere by the time anyone thought to write it down. The Vanishing Hitchhiker is perhaps the most widely distributed ghost story in human history. A narrative so universal, so perfectly collaborated to the specific anxieties of people who travel alone in the dark, that it has appeared independently across cultures and centuries and continents with a consistency that should, if you think about it long enough, be deeply unsettling. Because stories don't usually do that. Stories travel. They spread through contact, through culture, through the movement of people carrying their folklore with them. But a story that appears in Japan and the Philippines and rural America and the back roads of England and the highways of South Africa, a story that crosses every cultural barrier, survives every translation, adapts to every landscape while keeping its essential shape intact, that is not a story that spread. That is a story that was always there, waiting to be found. The structure is always the same. That is the first thing that researchers noticed, and the first thing that makes the legend impossible to dismiss as simple entertainment. A driver, alone, at night, or in bad weather, or on a road that has the particular quality of isolation that makes the ordinary feel provisional. The safety and routine of the journey, the familiar weight of the steering wheel, the predictability of the road ahead, already carrying a faint, unexamined unease. A figure, on the shoulder, always vulnerable in their presentation, young, often female, dressed for somewhere they no longer seem to be, standing in conditions that no one should be standing in alone. Everything about the image activates the instinct that separates us from animals, the instinct to help, to stop, to open the door. The ride. She gets in. She is quiet, not rudely quiet, not alarmingly quiet, but quiet in the way of someone carrying something heavy that they are not ready to put into words. She gives an address, a destination. She may speak a little. She may say almost nothing. She is cold. Always cold. The temperature in the car drops when she enters it. The witnesses rarely register this consciously until afterward, when they are sitting alone in the empty vehicle trying to understand what just happened, and then they remember. She was cold. The disappearance. It happens without warning, without sound, without the door opening or any physical mechanism that could account for it. One moment she is in the back seat, the next moment the back seat holds only air, and sometimes, only sometimes, in the versions of the legend that carry the most weight, a wet patch on the seat where she was sitting. The physical residue of presence, the evidence that something was there, even though nothing is there now. The revelation. The driver, shaken, goes to the address she gave, knocks on the door, describes the woman, and the person who answers, older, tired, carrying the specific weight of grief that has been carried for a long time, tells the driver what they have driven all this way to be told. She died years ago on this road, on a night just like this one. She's been trying to get home ever since. The man who did more than anyone to document this legend was a folklorist named Jean-Harold Bruvard. Bruvard spent his career studying what he called urban legends, a term he helped define and popularize through a series of books beginning in the 1980s. His work was meticulous, academic, and utterly gripping. He understood that urban legends were not simply entertainment. They were cultural documents, encoded anxieties, the stories a society tells itself about the things it cannot directly look at: death, danger, the frailty of the ordinary world, the thin membrane between the living and whatever comes after. The Vanishing Hitchhiker was one of the first legends he examined in depth. He traced it across cultures and centuries. He found versions of it in Hawaiian folklore, in Chinese ghost stories, in the oral traditions of African communities, in European accounts going back to the 19th century. Before automobiles existed, the legend traveled in horse-drawn carriages, the vehicle changing with the era while the story beneath it stayed exactly the same. What Brevin concluded was that the Vanishing Hitchhiker persisted not because people kept sharing it, but because it kept being experienced. That the reports of actual encounters, actual drivers who had actually stopped for an actual figure on an actual road and arrived at their destination to find the seat empty, were too numerous, too consistent, too distributed across unconnected populations to be explained away as the retelling of a story heard somewhere else. Something was generating the experience. Whether that something was psychological, the human mind, under the specific conditions of night driving and isolation, producing what the legend had primed it to produce, or whether the something was genuinely, physically, inexplicably out there on the road. Brevin did not definitely answer that question. He was a scientist. He documented. He analyzed. He left the deepest question to the rest of us. There are two details that recur across the global accounts of the Vanishing Hitchhiker with a frequency that Brevin and researchers after him have flagged as significant. The first is the jacket. In dozens of independent accounts from dozens of unconnected cultures and time periods, the sequence is the same. The driver, noticing that the passenger is cold, responding to the fundamental human impulse to take care of someone in discomfort, offers a jacket, a coat, a sweater, something warm. She accepts it. She disappears. And when the driver, still trying to process the disappearance, still running through every rational explanation, and finding none of them sufficient, goes to the address she gave, knocks on the door, has the conversation that no one should have to have, and then afterward, in the grief and the shock and the strange, disorienting aftermath of being told that the woman they drove through the cold was already dead, they go to the cemetery, and they find their jacket, folded neatly, laid carefully on top of the gravestone, not dropped, not thrown, placed, with the deliberateness of someone who understands what they borrowed and has made sure it was returned. Think about what that means. Whatever she is, whatever state of existence she occupies between the road and the grave, she knows. She is aware enough of what she borrowed to return it, aware enough of the living world to complete the transaction. Whatever the Vanishing Hitchhiker is, she is not simply a replay, not a recording, not a mindless echo of a life that ended. She is present. She is here, and she pays her debts. The second detail is harder to sit with. Some folklorists, scholars who have studied the Vanishing Hitchhiker, not as entertainment but as a genuine cultural phenomena worth serious academic attention, have proposed a theory that reframes the entire legend. Crisis apparitions. The term comes from parapsychology, the study of what happens or appears to happen at the extreme edges of human consciousness. A crisis apparition is a specific kind of reported phenomena. The appearance of a person, their image, their voice, their physical presence as perceived by witnesses at the exact moment of that person's death or severe injury. Loved ones across great distances reporting that they saw someone, clearly, unmistakably, in full physical detail, at the precise moment that the person was dying somewhere else. The appearance lasting only moments before fading, the witness learning afterward that the time of the appearance matched the time of the death exactly. The crisis apparition theory of the vanishing hitchhiker suggests something profound and deeply sad. That the original accounts, the oldest, earliest versions of this legend before it became a legend, when it was still simply something that happened to people on roads, were not ghost sightings in the traditional sense. They were the last act of a dying consciousness, a young woman dying in a crash on a dark road, using whatever remained of her awareness and her will in those final moments to do the one thing she desperately needed to do. Get home. To her parents, to her house, to the address she gave every driver who stopped for her. Not haunting, not cursed, not trapped, but trying. Trying to get home one last time, through whatever mechanism a dying mind has available to do. Projecting herself onto the road, into the cars of strangers, using their momentum to close the distance between where she died and where she needed to be, and never quite making it. Because whatever she used to get into the car was not enough to take her all the way through the gates. Not all the way home. Not yet. Of all the vanishing hitchhikers in all the world, and there are many, documented carefully, spread across every culture that has ever had roads and cars and lonely nights, one stands above the rest. One has a name. One has bent iron bars and scorch marks on a cemetery gate, and a police report that has never been satisfactorily explained. Resurrection Mary. Chicago's most famous ghost, the vanishing hitchhiker made specific, made personal, made into something that has been standing on Archer Avenue in Justice, Illinois, since at least 1939, and that, by most accounts, is still there. The road runs southwest of Chicago through suburbs that press against each other under the flat Midwestern sky. Past the site of what was once the O. Henry Ballroom, later renamed the Willowbrook Ballroom, a dance hall that drew young Chicagians throughout the 1930s and 1940s, a place where the music was good and the floor was full, and a young person could spend an evening in the exact kind of ordinary, luminous joy that makes what comes next so devastating by contrast, and past the gates of Resurrection Cemetery, where she always goes, where she never arrives. The first documented sighting comes from 1939. A man named Jerry Palis attended a dance at the O. Henry Ballroom. He danced with a young woman, blonde, in a white dress, somewhat distant in a way he attributed to sadness, present but not quite entirely there. When the evening ended, she asked him for a ride. He drove her down Archer Avenue. As they approached Resurrection Cemetery, she asked him to stop. So he did. She got out. She walked toward the cemetery gates. She was gone. Not gone in the sense of walking away and disappearing into the dark. Gone in the sense that one moment she was there, and the next moment she was not, with nothing in between. Palis went back to the ballroom, described the woman he had danced with. Staff and regulars recognized her immediately. She had been coming to the ballroom for years. She had been dead for years. The sightings accumulated across the decades with a consistency that even skeptical researchers have found difficult to entirely dismiss. In the 1940s, a cab driver reported picking up a young blonde woman on Archer Avenue in freezing temperatures. The white dress, no coat, no explanation for why she was standing there in the cold. He drove toward the address she gave him. As he passed Resurrection Cemetery, he turned to check on his passenger. The seat was empty. He pulled over, got out, looked up and down the road. Nothing. He reported the incident. He described in careful detail the wet patch on the back seat where she had been sitting, the physical evidence of someone who was no longer there. A man named Ralph Andrews reported an encounter in the 1950s, a woman in the white standing directly in the road ahead of his car. caught in his headlights. He braked hard, felt the impact, the unmistakable, sickening feeling of having hit someone. So he stopped the car. He got out, searched the road, the shoulder, the area around his vehicle. There was no one there. Nobody. No blood. No damage to his car. He drove home and did not sleep that night. In the 1970s, a man named David Donahue reported seeing a young woman in a white dress running alongside his car as he drove past the cemetery, keeping pace with the vehicle at road speed in a way that was not physically possible. He said her face was turned toward him as she ran, looking directly at him. Her expression was not frightened. It was desperate. And then there is 1976, the single most documented, most scrutinized, most persistently unexplained event in the entire history of the Resurrection Mary legend. On a night in August of that year, a motorist driving past Resurrection Cemetery noticed something that stopped him completely. A young woman standing inside the cemetery gates, her hands wrapped around the iron bars, her face pressed against them, turned outward toward the road, toward Archer Avenue, toward the living world on the other side. The man, believing he had witnessed a young woman accidentally locked inside the cemetery after closing time, called the police. Officers responded. They found no woman inside the cemetery. What they found, what they documented in an official police report that has been examined and re-examined by researchers for nearly 5 decades, were the bars of the cemetery gate. Bent. 2 bars in the section where the woman had reportedly been standing, pulled and twisted out of alignment in a way that metal bends under sustained extreme force. The kind of force that a human being cannot generate with bare hands. And on those bent bars, what appeared to be handprints, seared into the metal. Not painted, not scratched, burned, as if whatever had gripped those bars had done so with hands that were not the temperature of living hands. The cemetery had the damaged bars removed quickly, too quickly, some researchers noted, and replaced. The official explanation offered was that a city vehicle had backed into the gate and caused the damage, and that a worker had attempted to repair it by hand, leaving the marks. This explanation has satisfied almost no one who has examined the photographs taken before the bars were removed. The handprints were the wrong size for a repair worker. They were small, the size of a young woman's hands, pressed against the iron from the inside, trying to get out. Researchers have spent decades trying to identify the real woman behind the legend. The most compelling candidate is Mary Burgovy. Mary Burgovy was a young Chicago woman who loved to dance. She frequented the ballrooms of the Chicago area in the early 1930s, including, by all accounts, the O. Henry Ballroom on Archer Ave. On March 10, 1934, she was killed in an automobile accident in downtown Chicago. She was 21 years old. She was buried at Resurrection Cemetery. Her grave is there, her name is on the stone, and the description that witnesses have provided for nearly 90 years, the blonde hair, the white dress, the age, the connection to the ballroom on Archer Ave. The destination at the cemetery gates maps onto Mary Burgovy with a specificity that other candidates have not matched. But the identification is not certain. Other researchers have proposed other women, other young deaths, other burials at Resurrection, other lives cut short in the ballroom area of the 1930s Chicago. The legend, they argue, may have absorbed multiple real tragedies in a single composite figure. The way grief sometimes works, the way a community's accumulated sorrow for its young dead can crystallize around one name, one face, one image of a girl in a white dress standing at the edge of the road. What none of the research has produced is a clean, definitive answer. Mary keeps her secrets. She's been keeping them for 90 years, and she does not appear to be planning to stop. The modern sightings have not ended. A woman driving Archer Avenue in 2008 reported a figure in white on the shoulder of the road near the cemetery. There, in her headlights, gone when she looked in the rearview mirror. She was familiar with the legend. She had grown up in the area. She said knowing the story did not make the seeing of it any less disorienting. She said, "I've driven that road 1,000 times. I know every light, every landmark. She wasn't there, and then she was, and then she wasn't. I don't know how else to describe it. The road does something near that cemetery. It has always done something." A rideshare driver working in the southwest Chicago suburbs reported on a paranormal forum in 2019 picking up a fare near Archer Avenue late on a Friday night. Young woman, blonde, white dress. He assumed she was coming from a formal event. She was quiet. He noted that she seemed cold, that the temperature in the car dropped noticeably when she got in. She asked to be dropped near the cemetery. He pulled over at the address. He turned around to confirm the drop-off. The car was empty. His app showed the ride has completed. The fare had been paid. There was no record of who had requested it. He has not driven that stretch of Archer Avenue at night since. What the legend of the vanishing hitchhiker ultimately asks, what every version of it from every culture across every century is really asking, is a question that has no comfortable answer. What do the dead want? Not the dramatic, vengeful dead of horror stories, not creatures with hooks and burning eyes and the machinery of terror. Just people. Ordinary people who were going somewhere on an ordinary night and did not arrive. Who had a home they were trying to get back to and a road that ended before they reached it. Do they know what happened to them? Do they understand where they are? Or are they simply still moving, still traveling, still trying, still standing at the edge of the road in the cold with one hand out? Because the momentum of a life that was supposed to keep going has nowhere else to put itself. The jacket on the gravestone says something. It says she knows that she is present enough, aware enough, connected enough to the living world. She left to complete a transaction, to return what was given, to acknowledge in the only way available to her that something passed between her and the person who stopped. Something real, something that happened, something that mattered. Tonight, if you find yourself on a road you know, a road you've driven 100 times, a road that should hold no surprise, and the headlights pick up something on the shoulder, something that looks like a person standing in the cold, in a dress that belongs to a different evening, the instinct will come. The one that was taught, the one that says, stop, help, open the door. And maybe you should. Maybe she just needs a ride. Maybe she's just trying to get home. But before you reach for the door handle, check the back seat first. Because sometimes she doesn't wait to be invited. Sometimes she's already there, already cold, already gone before you realize she was ever with you at all. And the only evidence she leaves is the chill that doesn't fade, and the wet patch on the seat, and the jacket you'll find tomorrow morning on a gravestone you've never visited, folded neatly, waiting for you to come and get it. And so it ends, for now. You've survived another descent into the dark, but survival, as you've learned, comes with a cost. The things you heard tonight don't stay here. They travel with you, through the hallways into the quiet rooms, behind the eyes that close but never quite rest. This is what Season 3 does. It doesn't just scare you, it stays. If you felt it, subscribe. Share it with someone brave enough to listen. Leave a review, leave a comment, because your words carry this darkness further than you know. And turn on notifications, because the next episode is already waiting, already breathing. We'll be here when you return. We're always here. This has been Fear Consortium Season 3. Where the fear doesn't fade, it evolves. Sleep well. We'll be watching.